All right, good afternoon and welcome to our annual Title II end of year closeout presentation. Everyone should have received a memo a couple weeks ago. I think we sent it mm, around the 16th or 17th. If you did not get it, I sent it out to the CBOs, the basic skills list serve, as well as the CCLEIS list serve. But if you did not get that, let us know and we're happy to send you a copy. This presentation, as well as a recording of today's presentation, will be available on the NC Title II website as soon as possible. And in the chat, you will see a Word document that you'll want to download. That's the personnel survey to update your table sevens with your faculty and staff, which we will touch on again a little later in the presentation. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. So, again, we will give you a copy of this presentation as well as a copy of the recording of today's session. The 25-26 program year will officially close in advances at noon on Wednesday, July 29th. If you are a CCR director or data coordinator, this is a very, very, very important date. Please be so mindful. Put this on a calendar, on your wall, a reminder on your e-calendar, whatever works best for you. But please know that we will officially close the 25-26 program year at noon on Wednesday, July 29th. That means that it is imperative that you enter and approve all of your state and federal data that needs to be entered into advances from July 1 of 25 through June 30th of 26 before that deadline of noon on the 29th of July. Once it is 12:01 on Wednesday, July 29th, advances will close the 25-26 program year, and we cannot make any changes to data that is dated July 1 of 25 through June 30th of 26. So what all does that include? That means any NRS registrations that fell between July 1 and June 30th of this year, any NRS assessments from July 1 of 25 through June 30th of 26, any NRS profile changes, any outcomes, and that also, and this is important for the colleges, that includes attendance through June 30th. If you are running classes on the summer load period, so this is more of a reminder for our colleges, but also our CBOs to be aware as well, but especially colleges, summer classes can run on that standard term of May 16th through August 14th, but that does mean that all of your attendance for July 1 through June 30th of 2026 has to be entered and approved by that deadline. What happens every year is that around or after August 14th, colleges start putting in ServiceNow tickets to make adjustments to registrations and attendance that occurred before July 1 of 2026. Once we close the program year, which we are again doing at noon on July 29th, you cannot make any edits to anything that happened before July 1st of 2026. So if you're going to run it on this standard summer term, that's fine. You just have to go ahead and put it into your workflow that you're going to do a final check of your student registrations and attendance through June 30th before we close the program year. So, other things you want to do to start preparing now, track your upcoming POP separations closely. POPs do end 90 days after the last activity. Activity again in advances is considered to be attendance and NRS assessments. So you can run that separation report ahead of time though, and if you know students are not returning, it's been more than 90 days, you can go ahead and manually separate them as opposed to waiting on the system to auto separate them after 105 days of inactivity. Um, Please, again, I cannot stress to you how important it is that your whole team understands that noon on July 29th, program year 25-26 is locked. We cannot make any entries, approvals, or edits. We will ask Benchmark to send us the final flat file on July 30th. And once they do that, we start our data calculations, tabulations, and cleanup for our federal reports. And so if we let anybody make any changes to the data in advances after that deadline, we would have to then pull a new report and start that whole process over, which is not something that we want to do because it involves our partner agencies of Commerce, National Student Clearinghouse, Diploma Center, etc. So it is not an easy task to put together the state's federal tables. So once that process starts, we do not make any changes to the previous program year data. Run the NRS separation report weekly. Go ahead and manually separate any of these students that you see that are greater than 106 days for whatever reason. That means the system skipped over the auto separation of them. Courtney does do a really great job of monitoring that and reaching out to providers when we see folks on there though. But we also want everybody to be in the habit of doing that as well. The only time that you would leave them on there is if they do have a future service date. And then remove students from secondary registrations when they're no longer active. So even if their NRS registration is active, if they wanted to be in adult high school earlier in the program year, but now they're not, you can go ahead and end the adult high school secondary registration. Same thing with multiple pathways, secondary registration, IET, IELCE, etc. So you can keep a student in their active NRS registration, but if they're not doing that secondary registration anymore, go ahead and separate them from that for whatever the last day they were in that special program date was. All right. The other thing to understand is that for 26-27, the 26-27 program year, now that we are in advances, starts first thing July 1st of 2026. A long time ago, when we were only in colleague, you had to wait on the system office to pretty much separate out all of your students. We would tell you to run some mnemonics in colleague, roll the program year. We do not do any of those things anymore. Effective July 1, 2026, we will be in the 26-27 program year, which means the 270-day look-back period goes into effect. Assessments that were given before October 4th cannot be used for an entering EFL in the new program year on your continuous students. So if a student took an NRS assessment on October 3rd, on July 1, that test is not going to pull forward. So 270 days back from July 1 of 2026 is October 4th, 2025. So be aware of that. If you have students from, say, July 1 or even in the previous program year look back, if your student has not had an assessment, an NRS assessment since October 4th, and they're not on an alternate placement or adult high school or something like that, you need to go ahead and give them an NRS assessment for the new program year, because if they don't have one since October 4th of 2025, nothing's going to pull forward using the 270-day look back period. Also, you want to run testing alerts. Identify any continuous students without a valid NRS assessment that are going to carry forward into the new program year. Also, before July 1, I cannot stress this one enough. Before July 1, run testing alerts. Look for any exit ESL students. If a student shows as exit ESL or an ESL graduate as their last test given, you need to now, before June 30th, switch their contact type to ABASE and administer an ABASE NRS assessment before June 30th. If you do not, the system is going to pull forward that exit ESL graduate, and that cannot be used as a placement for the new program year. So a lot of times what we see happen is students post-test in ESL and they score exit ESL, which is fantastic. And it can be used for that post-test gain. However, it cannot be used as their initial placement if they're going to continue with you into the 26-27 program year. So it is important to run that testing alerts, filter for your exit ESL students, and go ahead and get them switched over to the ABASE contact type and administer an ABASE NRS assessment before June 30th. All right. So, other very important things to keep in mind. Students who have attendance or an NRS assessment at any point on or after July 1 will automatically become active for the new program year. So, if you have continuous students who have, so you've got a student who's in a POP today, and on July 1, you give them an NRS assessment, but then they never return to the program. They will be a participant for the 26-27 program year because their last day of activity is going to be 7/1/26. So make sure that you are strategically testing folks, giving attendance, that kind of thing with the continuous students because just because the program year ends doesn't mean that all of the POPs end and start over. So the POP continues across program years. And so any activity which is attendance or NRS assessments as of July 1 pulls them into the new program year. Make sure you're paying close attention to your data entries. So if that's an active POP, currently any hours or assessments on or after July 1, that activates students into the new program year. And so if they don't do anything after the July 1 or first week of July, you're still going to have them in your denominator for MSG percentage calculations. All right. And why this is important and where we see this happen the most is adult high school. So you do not want to just give a blanket placement for adult high school by going to every student's transcript page and saying set entering EFL. Unless that student is returning and actively enrolled in an adult high school class. So you don't want to just let's say I have 100 adult high school students. On July 1, I do not want to go into 100 records and set the entering EFL for adult high school on all 100 students because that means all 100 continuing students are now part of the 26-27 program year as participants for me. What I want to do is wait and make sure they are in a class, they are actively attending, and then go and give that AHS placement if necessary. So just be cautious is what I'm saying. All right. So the other big thing you need to start doing, and we have gotten into a much better habit as the years have gone on with continuously checking Power BI as each period updates against the advances data. Years ago, this used to be much more of a end of program year push, and it could be very overwhelming to providers as well as state staff. But I think that especially this program year, we've done a much better job of checking it period by period and really staying on top of data. But as a reminder, Power BI data is your official source of record for state and federal performance funding. So where we pull your final MSG percentage is Power BI. So you do want to routinely check your validated data each period. I always send an email saying, hey, this, period 8 is updated. Please check, your data against advances. Look at the HSE tab in Power BI. Make sure you don't have anybody that you've reported as a graduate in advances that we were not able to data match on our side, because those need to be cleaned up. Make sure that all of the MSGs on the overview page are equating out to what you would expect to see based on number of AHS grads, HSE grads, HSE subtests, post-testing, that kind of thing. Again, that HSE tab is important. Courtney and Jen do a really good job of reaching out, though, when we do have students on there with a provider where they could not be data matched. But just always be in the habit of checking for those each period. And then also please remember any square, any of the gray squares in Power BI, you can right click on it and select drill through to then export that data to Excel. So if I'm on the overview page and it says I have 26 students who completed adult high school, like they're adult high school diploma earners, I can right click on that number and select drill through, and it'll export a list of those student ID numbers so that I can double check data and understand where that number is coming from. But any square, cell, rectangle on Power BI, you can right click and it'll give you that drill through option so that you can export the data to Excel. Your advances data is your holding tank of it's where you're acquiring data, entering data. It's kind of like a pre I'm not sure what I was trying to say there, but it's just kind of where you input the data and it holds it. The flat file pushes it to Power BI, and that's where we do your validations. Because as you're all aware, when you try to look at your table 4 or any of your federal tables in advances, the data does not align to what you see in your federal tables through Power BI. And that is because advances is showing you deduplicated student data as it is supposed to. That is the way the data looks in terms of how the state reports the students federally. So if a student is enrolled with multiple providers, only the provider who first enrolled the student is going to see the student on their federal tables. Any subsequent providers will not see the student on their federal tables, and that is because Advances is deduplicating students on those federal Advances reports to show you what it looks like when we report students federally, which is why we do still push to Power BI, and that's where we duplicate out any shared students and then redo the tables 1 through 6 to show you what your specific data looks like, since that is what we use for state and federal funding. So you can run daily reports, table 4, 4B, and the outcomes report. The outcomes report out of advances is extremely helpful when it comes to MSGs 3 through 5, AHS graduates, HSE graduates, and then high set subtest earners. So that is a good one to look at against what you're seeing in Power BI. And then you can use the Excel analysis where you're comparing table 4 and 4B to you can do that either in advances or with the NRS tables in Power BI as well. Okay. So what you definitely want to be doing is double checking on that overview tab that the MSG types are correct. Again, you can right click, select drill through, and export out a list of the student numbers for where we're getting the total number that you're seeing on the overview tab. You also want to look at that participant pre-post by hours tab. That's your participant post-test gain rate by hours of attendance. And then your HSE tab, make sure you don't have any students reported where the state could not match them in the system, that you would want to clear up the discrepancy between diploma sender and advances. And then we also in Power BI want you to double check your NRS tables. We do offer tables 1 through 6. And so that's going to give you these different areas to evaluate. So double check those, that you got to kind of scroll down the left hand side and you'll see NRS tables, and then it expands out with the different options for 1 through 6. Um, so then the other thing, there is a job aid and advances under the yellow support tab that's titled How Do I Manage Users? Users are all of your Title II faculty and staff. It is important to make sure that you go in and make any accounts where that faculty or staff person is no longer employed with your Title II area. With your, if they're not working in advances anymore, go ahead and make their account inactive. Use and follow the steps in the job aid for how you do that if you're not familiar with it. But in the chat, I put a Word document that is a personnel survey. If you do not have your own personnel survey, you're welcome to use that one. That one's not fancy, but it does allow you to capture the data needed on any new faculty or staff that you provide access to advances with. And so you definitely want to make sure that anybody who is no longer working with you is made inactive, and anybody that should be active is in the system. It is imperative that you do this before June 30th, because you do not have individual table sevens that we publish on Power BI. However, we use all of the providers' table 7 data to create the one for the state that we report up federally. So it's very important that if you have folks who should be inactive, that you make them inactive, because I can't look at a list of 20,000 accounts and know who is and is not current, should be active in the system. So be sure to do that as well. If you need any help with it or any of these steps as you go along, you're always welcome to put in a ServiceNow ticket. Reach out to myself or Courtney. We're always happy to assist, but we definitely want to make sure that each provider is doing the things listed in the end of year closeout memo and today's PowerPoint. So, a couple other reports that we want to make sure everybody's running under student management, that missing entering EFL report. So depending on the workflow, this is going to be students who've not returned to complete NRS testing. You need to give those students either a provisional EFL, an alternate placement if that's applicable, set their entering EFL for AHS if that is applicable. But all students need to have a placement for the program year. And then also under that same student management tab, there's the NRS separation report that we talked about earlier in the slides. That's going to show you any students without activity for at least 90 or more days. Student management tab again, testing alerts, filter for students needing a post-test. You can also use this to filter for your exit ESL students as well. And then another helpful report is under supplemental reports. Your student NRS registration attendance report, that's going to display the registration date, separation date, year-to-date attendance, and entering EFL. Just another plug and reminder for Social Security number collection. Over the past 5 program years, Octay did let us know that our rate of SSN collection across the state has steadily dropped. For example, in 2019, we collected about 70% of Title II participants' Social Security numbers, and by 2024, the last time we did our federal reporting, we only had about 58% of our participants that had a full SSN listed. So North Carolina is a data match state. We do not ask providers to fill out surveys on all of their students 6 months after they exit and then a year after they exit. We want to remain a data matching state. So in order to be a data matching state, we have to use the Social Security numbers that students report, and we match that against the wage report through Commerce, and then also National Student Clearinghouse. But if a student doesn't have an SSN, then we are not able to match anything on those other agency reports. Now, does that mean that you cannot accept students who do not have an SSN? Then no, that is not what I said. But we want all providers to make sure that you do the best you can to get SSNs from students. For example, when I was at Johnston, and we, especially adult high school with the younger students, they don't know their SSN off the top of their head. They came in for orientation, and we double check the LEIS form and say, do you have an SSN? And they're like, yeah, but I don't know it off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to ask my mom. Okay, no problem. Follow back up with those students though to make sure that if you can get it, you do get it so that it goes into the system so that we can data match those students if at all possible. Because we are held as a state to second quarter after exit employment, fourth quarter after exit employment, median earnings, credential attainment. And so we want to make sure we're able to match as many students as possible to give the best reflection of the outcomes of our students in our state. These are our performance indicators that we are hoping to hit this year. They are higher than what they were last year. So, again, importance of SSN. So these are also posted on the System Office website for the performance section, as well as on the Title II website for our performance section. I do not have the indicator numbers back from Octay yet for next year. As soon as we have those approved, though, we will send them out to let you all know, hoping that's going to be soon. And then barriers to employment, that was the one-page supplemental LEIS form that we put out a couple years ago. And you want to make sure that for these areas, we just had another webinar with Octay last month. They went over the importance of this again. The best advice I can give all of us is when Octay gives out advice, especially twice now in a row, we should do our best to listen. So we did create a more updated barriers to employment form about a year ago. And so you want to collect as many applicable barriers for your students as possible. We know oftentimes students don't want to fill out a lot of forms, but we do ask that students only fill out the LEIS form upon initial entry into your program. And then if they stop out, so the pop closes and they come back at a later date for a new pop, those should be the only times that you're having students fill out the LEIS forms as well as this barriers to employment form. Hopefully no one is still in the habit of having students fill out the LEIS forms as registration to every class that the student is enrolling to, because then you definitely get less feedback on those forms as well. All of these are student self-reported, but if you have formal orientations, that kind of thing, as you're double checking and approving this information, hopefully in a conversation with your students as they're coming in, we do want them to check as many of these that are applicable. And many of you guys have a lot of very great services for students that are in a lot of these barrier to employment situations. So it's a win-win for all involved usually. So, but just some things that were noted by Octay, that low income, North Carolina was 6% lower than the national average. And then 23.35% reported that they were low income, but 53% also reported they were unemployed or not in the labor force. Generally, if you are unemployed, you are probably low income. And so that was a noticeable gap there as well. And then long-term unemployment, we had 7.5% report that they were in long-term unemployment, but again, 53% who said they were unemployed or not in the labor force. And then single parents, this does include single pregnant women. We were 2% lower than the national average. So, hopefully, maybe our students don't have that many barriers to employment, but I would find that surprising when you put this against census data. So just make sure that students are filling out any that are applicable, and not just leaving that whole section of the LEIS form blank. Also with corrections, all justice involved correction students should also be marked as ex-offender. The ex-offender, we do have the data dictionary on the website. Ex-offender means that you've had any previous or current run-ins with law enforcement to where you had a misdemeanor, felony, probation, parole, jail, prison, that kind of thing. So, if some of these you're not sure about, the data dictionary that's on the website is a great resource, and it really breaks down and explains those better. So for example, in 24, we only reported 36% of our corrections participants as ex-offenders, and that should be 100% of our corrections participants should have also been marked as ex-offender. And then for all CCR students do have to have that eligibility criteria. So they need to either select that they're an English language learner, low literacy, and or basic skills deficient. You have to have one of those three to be eligible to receive services through Title II. When we were in colleague, we combined all three of these things into something called ELLCB, and we just check that on every student in the state. Advances does break it out by each of the areas, but a student should fall into one of these three categories if they are receiving services through Title II funds. All right. I know that was a tremendous amount of information. Hopefully, nothing was new, though. I really hope nothing was new. And if some of it was new, do not fret. We're going to send you the slide deck. We're going to give you a copy of the recording of today's session. And we have plenty of time for folks to ask questions that they may have. And did I stop sharing, Lee?
You have, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
And feel
on
free to
Zoom.
put your questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand virtually. We do have a lot of participants today. So if you raise your hand in the video screen, we probably won't see it. So yes,
Yeah.
please use the virtual option if you'd like to unmute yourself.
All right.
Ask your question. And looks like already Courtney's been answering a lot of questions. So thank you so much for that support, Courtney.
Let's see. It looks like Jen answered a couple too. So
She did.
Jennifer Warner said, what if they post-test in reading and listening and achieve exit ESL only on one of the tests? Can they remain in ESL? Jen put a reference to page 20 of the assessment manual. So a student who post-tests into the advanced ESL exit range may continue to take ESL assessments until ESL exit has been reached in all possible content areas. Looks like Courtney answered the next one, but just in case folks can't see the chat or miss these, if you have a student who exits ESL in June, but you can't pre-test them with an ASE test before June 30th, you can still do it in July, right? And Courtney said you can add a provisional until you're able to test them. So yes, that's true. You would want to switch their contact type from ESL to ABE-ASE and then add that provisional EFL for ABE-ASE until you can test them. But if you could do that before June 30th, that is very helpful because the system really locks in those exit EFL placements to where it takes Monica and I a lot of time on the back end to try to tease those out to get an actual initial placement for the student. Bryce said, we do not see any information for our HSE grads or completed tests. Courtney asked for an email. She'll take a look. Aaron said, for the attendance hours of duplicated students, those who attend at two providers, is that data validated fixed each period so the Power BI tables are accurate total attendance hours for the provider, or does that deduplication only occur at the end of the year? Courtney said the state reports all NRS hours total, but for your individual provider performance, you get credit for attendance at your provider only. And we do update that each period in Power BI, so it's not done just at the end of the year. Every time I send that email that says the period data has updated in Power BI, that duplication process has occurred. Crystal asked, can anyone in CCR working with data have access to Power BI? How do we confirm to get access? Uh, let's see. So, if you are at a college, your every college has what we call a designated data coordinator. This person is usually in institutional effectiveness, institutional research, curriculum. They deal with big college-wide reports like your ICR as a whole, that kind of thing. If you do not know who your college's data coordinator is, you're welcome to email me. I'll let you know the most recent contact I have for your institution. But that person is the one who actually grants Power BI access to anybody else at the local level. So that's done by that person at the college to anybody that wants access at that local level. If you are a community-based organization and you need access, you just send me an email and we'll get you access that way. So at the state level, we only do the CBOs because they don't have direct access to ServiceNow. And then for the colleges, that access is done by the data coordinator at each institution. Aaron said, I have notes from August that say we're going to have to start doing follow-up surveys this year, and there's going to be a training on this in January. Did I miss that? Yes, that note is correct, but no, you did not miss a training. After we looked at it and looked at it and looked at it a couple more times up here at the state, it is going to be way too cumbersome on the local level providers to try to reach out to folks 6 months after they've left your program and then again a year after they have left their program. And on the off chance that you did get someone to answer the phone, with all the spammy calls and things that everybody gets these days, the likelihood that they're going to answer the question of, are you currently employed? Well, how much do you make every 3 months? I'm pretty sure that would end that call right there. So, we talked about it and talked about it, and for the time being, we are going to just rely on the data matching because we just don't have an easier process that we could apply to get in touch with students, and then to tabulate that data like you guys would have to put in to advance this. We'd have to build a whole new section of the flat file. And then honestly, on the data warehouse side, because that flat file from Benchmark goes into another big data tank that we call data warehouse, and data warehouse processes these 82 files that we call the flat file, and we don't have a way to really tease in manual entry data to that big old warehouse. So for the time being, we're going to just pause there, see what we can get. We do see a lot more SSNs coming in this past summer and fall, so we're hoping that process continues. Really, I think what was happening with a lot of providers is that they just didn't understand, through turnover, what have you, they didn't understand the importance of getting that full social from the student. And so now that folks do, we're seeing a lot more going into the system. So we're hoping that's sufficient for us to just keep data matching. Where can I access the Excel analysis tool? So Chris, I think you're talking about the table 4B Excel analysis tool. That is located on the system office website, so ncommunitycolleges.edu. If you click on for colleges and then go to CCR, if you click on the performance tab, it's there. Actually, I think I can just put it in this chat too. It's also on the Title II website. That's something we go over in New Director Orientation 3. But let me see if I can just drop it in this chat too. Directions are on either one of those websites, though. Mm, yep, there it is. All right, so I'm gonna add that to the chat. There you go. Um, oh, I gotta go back up. For low income, what are we using to indicate what low income is? Is there a range provided? Um, so you do want to look at the data dictionary, and let me see if I can also just drop that in the chat. There is a whole section. Let me just share this. So if you do not visit this area, it is important that you do. There we go. So if you go to the System Office webpage, and you click on, let me back up. So here's the main System Office webpage. Click on College Faculty and Staff up here in the left-hand corner. Then go over to Academics. Click on Academics. Hover over College and Career Readiness. Click there. And here we have Program Performance, and then we have an Advances tab. If you go to the Program Performance tab, this is where there's a webinar on Power BI. There's your CCR dashboards. There's also our NRS training classes. I think there's 10 of them. It goes through the different uh, important pieces about NRS and testing and data and kind of why we do what we do in Title II. And then there's also links to the PD archives and a link to our assessment page. But if you click on Advances, the first thing that you'll see, this Documents and Resources is the Table 4 Excel tool that I just put in the chat, but it also gives you the directions for how to use it. And then we also have several other helpful pieces, especially as it pertains to section builds, an explanatory of the advances, dashboard, data elements, that kind of thing. But the LEIS forms are on the Title II page. Hold on, let me transition to Title II. So all these different softwares right now. All right, so on Title II, back to share.
It'll all be more centralized eventually.
Yeah, quite soon, I think, too.
Yeah.
So for the time being, if you go to nctitle2.org, go to Director Resources. If you click on Program Performance and Operations, eventually all of the stuff in the NC Title II, I think by July 1, tentatively, is going to be in the NC Title, is going to be on the System Office webpage. So we kind of came here and now we're going back to the System Office webpage. But anyways, if you click on the Program Performance Operations, scroll down, towards the bottom of that page, here's your LEIS forms, fillable, non-fillable. There's a YouTube video on how to fill them out. There is also a how-to guide for how to fill them out if you don't want to watch the video. There's your barriers to employment, student intake form, but you also have your barrier to employment definitions. And then you also have your LEIS form, data dictionary. So if we look at the data dictionary, oh boy.
Are you trying to share your screen right now, Jess? You're just
Yeah, sure was. Just talking away. Sorry. Y'all know I'm a Teams fan. All right. So this is the barriers to employment. I just downloaded this as a PDF, so I will also put this in the chat. But this does go through not only the definition, but why it is required and where that information goes. Keep in mind that the whole reason why every student has to have an initial placement is because that is how we report the students on the federal tables. So we do not send the federal government anybody's name, social, address, phone number, advances ID, colleague ID. We only report students and their barriers to employment and demographics using their initial placement. That is why if a student doesn't have an initial placement, I can't put them anywhere on the tables. So this tells you where this information goes on the tables and gives you a much broader definition of what it's looking for. And then we did one also for the barriers to employment. But again, I'll put these now in the chat, which I seem to be getting quite skilled at.
You're an expert, Jess. You can do it.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm so Zoom challenged.
Well, you got to get over that.
Mental block. It's a mental block. All right. And then one more. How to fill it out. So, all kinds of useful documents today. There we go. All right, now I gotta find where I was on this chat. All right, so we were at low income. So, adult and teen challenge students, not justice involved. If they're court ordered to be there, I would say they were justice involved. If this is a voluntary situation, then maybe not. But if a judge ordered somebody to attend or else, then I would say that was justice involved. But again, you can double check it to the data dictionary that we have there. And then if we have students entered in an IET placement, but the class will not end until after June 30th, will their IET placement continue into the next program year? Anything we need to do? And Courtney said if the student is continuous, their secondary registration should automatically remain open. That is correct. Students, and I mean, really, you should have no idea that from June 30th to July 1, there's anything going on. It's just that we have to set some sort of cut date for data. But if the student's still in that IET, leave the IET open until they complete or decide they don't want to do it anymore. And then you're good to go. She said, do I need to set a new alternate placement or will that pull forward? The placement entering EFL is only relevant to NRS reg, so no. So as long as the NRS reg is a valid placement, it doesn't rely on its own placement. So if you gave the student an alternate placement instead of an NRS test, if you gave it to them before October 4th of 2025, you're going to have to enter a new one. If you gave it to them after October 4th of 2025, it should pull forward. The best way to know who needs alternate placement or adult high school redone, that kind of thing, is that especially in the first quarter, but you should always be doing this, but especially in the first quarter of the program year, a new program year, run that missing entering EFL under the student management tab, run that report weekly because as students get attendance and they're pulled into the new program year through that attendance, then it'll automatically start flagging who does and does not have an entering EFL on their continuous pop. And so it's a lot easier to do it that way. As opposed to going through student by student. So the system will let you know, especially as you start adding that attendance to the records. What about the students that come to registration but do not want to disclose that they've been incarcerated? Courtney answered that one, so we can only go by what the student self-reports. If you see in advances that they were previously enrolled at a prison, you can verify with the student, but ultimately what they report is what we report. And that goes for all the data on the LEIS form. It is all student self-reported. So if someone puts down an SSN, that's what you put in. Unless, I mean, obviously it pops up and says, this isn't new student Jill, this is this older student Sean that was, so it'll flag if you're trying to enter multiple SSNs that are already in the system, but we don't ask that you ask for any verification on any of these. It's all student self-reported. With exit ESL students contact type change to ABASE, can these students still be enrolled in the ESL program and continue with ESL classes? Courtney answered this. She is correct. Absolutely. The NRS contact type simply dictates what the assessment a student is taking is going to be. But yes, so just because a student tests out of ESL, that does not mean that they cannot still attend ESL classes. Do provisional EFLs initiate activity? Are provisionals important before 12 hours of attendance? Courtney put it's more of a hold. A provisional EFL can't stand alone, and a valid NRS assessment should still be entered within the first 12 hours. That is correct, but with the new program year coming, if you put a provisional EFL on a continuous student, the system will read that as taking the place of assessment activity, and you will pull that student into the new program year. So do not just blanket apply AHS entering EFL or provisional EFL on students who you think might attend July 1 or later. Let them show up and attend. And then, honestly, if it was me, I would just use that missing entering EFL report, run it every couple of days, at least once a week. And then I can deal with the students that are populating on that list as opposed to trying to make guesses on students ahead of them coming back. But for example, that we had with the exit ESL as the last score that a student received, that can't be used as a placement. So for that student, what I can do today or before June 30th is I can say, okay, student A, the last test they took was exit ESL. They made a gain. That's fantastic. I can today go ahead and switch their contact type to ABEASE and then enter a provisional ABE level assessment for a date prior to 7/1, and that takes care of that. So that's going to pull forward into the new program year if the student has attendance or if the student shows up to take an official ABE NRS test. Jen answered that one. Please explain when it's necessary to complete assessment forms on students that are continuing through each program term. ESL is the population I'm referring to. LEIS form. Okay, Courtney answered that one, and we went over that in the presentation. You only need to complete new LEIS forms for a new POP. So you complete it when the student first enters your program. So I'm brand new. I've never been to your institution. I have no idea what's going on. They need to fill out LEIS forms. If they stop attending for 90 or more days for whatever reason, and then the POP closes, so they exit, they have a separation date. Several months later, they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I left Miss So-and-so's class. I so want to get back in. I want to finish. You're like, no problem. That's going to start a new POP. And so you treat those students like a new student, have them fill out new LEIS forms, but that's it. All right. Somehow we have made it through all those, I think. All right. So any other questions, comments, concerns, anything else you need clarified, please feel free to drop the message in the chat or unmute and just ask your question, and we'll do the best we can to answer it for you. Oh, we have another one. We have students who haven't yet graduated from ESL that also take ABE/ASE classes. If they've already made level gains, we usually go ahead and switch them to ABE/ASE so we can track their progress on tape. The only problem I have is that you can no longer enter CASA's tests and show their exit from ESL. So you do, I mean, that's been the case since we started with advances in 23. So you have to select either ABE/ASE battery of tests or ESL as the battery of tests. But you cannot assess a student on both battery types. So, you are welcome to have students testing using ABE, ASE, NRS tests and have them in an ESL class. You could have a student who's using ESL assessments in an ABE class. That's fine. But in terms of the NRS assessments, you can't flip-flop. The teacher is going to have to use a local assessment for the other batteries, diagnostic needs, but you can't enter it into the system. Jasmine said last program year we had students who were separated who had active tests following the 270-day look-back period and did not have 90 days of inactivity. We needed a lot of help getting these students re-enrolled as they didn't pull forward. Is this something we can look forward to this program year? Jasmine, which school are you at? Forsyth. Um, that was just something that you all luckily pulled out of a hat because that was not the case across the state. It's you guys and one other school who at random times will do random things that I'm not really sure about. The only thing I can tell you is that with Colleague, there are 58 versions of Colleague. So we have 58 Boomi integrations going back and forth, and sometimes that data will spin weird out of Colleague back to Advances. And vice versa. Well, not really. No, no, not really vice versa. It's I can't tell you what it is, honestly. I'm just IT-ish. But it's something specific to you all that just so no, I hope not, but if it does, we'll deal with it if it comes, but hopefully not. I'm part of a CBO and we have students who are double enrolled at the community college. Some of these students have already been post-tested at the college, but are still taking classes and acquiring hours, more than 20 plus. Do we have to retest them? No. So if you share a student and the other institution has pre-tested them or post-tested them, the other provider is not also responsible for doing their own pre and post testing. Sometimes that does happen because at institution A they use TABE and institution B they use CASAs only. So when each provider doesn't have the same test, that's about the only time we see that happening. But even in those cases, it doesn't have to happen. But that's about the only time we see that happen. But if you see that the student's already been post-tested and made a gain, and you and another provider are sharing that student, both of you will get the MSG. And so you'll both see that when it goes to Power BI. So no, you don't have to test them again. And that's another thing that as we've done monitoring and technical assistance, this is spring semester. I don't even know what time of year it is at this point. It's spring semester. One of the things that I see here and there that I just want to remind everybody of is that there's two things. When students come into your program as new students, you do not have to assess them in all possible subject areas of an NRS assessment. So, for example, if you use TABE, you don't have to test the student in reading, math, and language the day they walk in that door. I would definitely recommend probably not doing that because that's a lot of testing. And if it was me personally, I don't know that I'd want to come back the next day because that would have felt like a lot. You can stagger it. I'm not saying don't test in all these areas, but I wouldn't do it to somebody on the first day when I'm trying to get them to want to come to my institution. The other thing I recommend against is oftentimes we're seeing where a provider keeps post-testing students, sometimes in all possible subject areas, every time they get to like 30, 40, 50 hours, they're like, oh, back to post-testing. Do not do that because now I really don't like coming to your program because all you're doing is testing me. I can only make one MSG per pop. So if I already have an EFL gain, I can't get any more EFL gains unless I leave your program for 90 or more days and then return at a later date. So you can't get multiple MSGs using one student. So just keep that in mind. So that's a lot of time, effort, and energy on your staff, on the student, and it's a kind of a waste of money with, I can't remember how much each computer-based TABE subject, or it was back when I did it was like $1.25 or something. But yeah, it's unnecessary time, effort, and energy on everybody's side. So once the student makes a gain, unless they leave you and come back, you don't need to continue testing them. Um, will ending the program year with students that have so many hours after having been post-tested be marked as incomplete in our report, like we were missing an assessment? No. No. So we just look at pop start date to pop end date, and during that pop, did the student post test? And if they post tested, did they make a gain? That checks all the boxes, and so we move on to the new program year. Now, I would look at your students who've made a gain and post tested to ensure that they have a test since October 4th, 2025. Because if they don't have a test since October 4th of 25, you're not going to have anything to pull into the new program year. But as long as they have a test since then, if they've already made a gain, there's no point in continuing to test. These end of years closeout meetings and then the CCR data question things, the way that there's a lot of like unexpected questions and things, it always feels like some sort of weird WIOA game show where I win no prizes. But
Exactly.
like
You sound like you know what you're talking about, Jessica, which is great.
yeah, let's all hope that I do. We'll find out now. Um, oh, that'd be even worse.
Already laughed at that. Well, we'll give you guys a couple more minutes. Here we go.
All right. I'm a little cloudy on entering EFLs for adult high school. We've been using the testing alert tool and it's pulling AHS students who are either level 5 or 6. How are we supposed to test on them when they're only measured by percent credits that they have? So on the testing alerts, let me find mine. Hold on. Luis, which school are you at? Stanley.
Um,
Da, 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 da. Do y'all get TABE and CASAs?
No, just CASAs.
Okay, so on the testing alerts, you can filter by test type. So we have just a broad CASAs, which would include any brand of CASAs testing. And we have a broad TABE 11 and a broad TABE 13, 14. But CASAs, we have that will pull in any ESL and AB, ASE testing pertaining to CASAs. So you can filter that way. And then you can also click on that button to exclude any students who are level 6, and you can also exclude students who've achieved an EFL for the year if that helps. That may not get rid of the 5s, but it should get rid of some of your. Well, no, that should get rid of your 5s too if you filter by classes. That should do it.
I guess I'm confused because they're adult high school, so they're not necessarily even have a test posted.
Right.
But it's
So
still
with alternate placement and adult high school, those were built by Benchmark for North Carolina. And
okay.
so when we were programming, we had to figure out the best programming logic for it that applies to the NRS guidelines. So we had to treat them like adult high school level 5 and level 6 is a test battery tied to the transcript page, and that alternate placement is like ASE level 6. And so it's tied to its own test battery as well.
Okay. So when it's
That's why
saying,
it shows up on the report.
so we don't really have to test them.
No, it's
mean,
just
'cause it's
saying, hey, I'm looking for an EFL.
okay. But they have it. That's all they have until the only way
Until
they
they
can
either
test.
cross over that 75% of credits or they complete their diploma, yes.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
It was just, it seemed like it was asking us for something we could not give. but it
Yeah,
kept
no,
getting
no,
dinged.
I
Okay,
get
we
how
didn't want to
that's
be dinged for that.
no, I get how that's confusing. Anybody who does have the adult high school secondary registration type, anybody whose placement is level 6, for AB, ASE, and then anyone who has alternate placement, whether that be for ABE or ESL, we do exclude those students in Power BI from your post-test rate calculation towards that 65% of students post-tested. So they are being excluded if they are placed based on credits or marked as adult high school, if they're level 6, or if they have alternate placement, because we understand that you're not going to NRS test those students, and that's not how they're going to make their MSG through an EFL game.
And this is one other thing we have. We have some students that change their minds, and like they might be adult high school and decide to be high school equivalency. So their high school equivalency NRS score is like level 3, but they've been looking like a 5 or 6 all along.
The system's still reading any subsequent, it works the same way with alternate placement too. If you have a student change their mind and then you later give them an NRS assessment, the
Okay.
placement remains the same, because again, that's just how you identify what row of the federal tables that student's being reported on. But the system will read any subsequent NRS tests for pre and post testing, and if they made a gain. With adult high school, if they change their mind, or IET or IELCE, you just put in that separation date on that secondary registration type to end it, so that it doesn't pull into the next program year if they continue with you. And then it also makes your registration reports accurate when you pull it, to see if you wanted to see like who all's in IET, and it would pull a list. And then if you've got a separation for that secondary registration type, it would populate that in that column, and you can quickly see, okay, I have this many people in IET and this many people in adult high school, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Jessica, since you're talking about high school, we NRS test all of our students at Brunswick. Everybody gets an NRS test,
Okay.
except for a select few of our IET students. So when I go to post test them, even though they have their placement, their adult high school placement, and as she was saying, I believe it was Louise, sometimes it's so variant, obviously. But when you post test them, you still get credit for their MSG if they make one, correct?
Correct.
And it still goes into your post test rating, correct?
Not if you've given them the secondary registration of adult high school.
Okay.
But any EFL gains that they may make because you choose to process them, we will give you credit for those, and you'll be able to see them when you right click on your pre-post
Right. I
gains
mean,
and
I thought
review page.
I was just making sure because the way that you
But
said it.
we don't
sound-
put adult high school into that post-test rate calculation because you're not required to pre and
Right,
post
it's
test
not
them.
required. Okay, I was just making sure that I was hearing you correctly. Thank you.
Yep.
Jessica, question. On that note, a predominant amount of our students are now making placement or level movement through subtest HSE. Well, that's still counted, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at our post-test rate, it looks pitiful, but our MSG rate for the year is always better, or at least in the last few years has been much better than the target. So I just want to make sure that we're still okay.
Yeah, so you're getting the MSG credit, which you get state and federal performance funding for. It's if you don't post test them, then you're not going to increase that post test rate. If you're seeing semester after semester that you have a lot of students come in and quickly pass an HSE subtest, I would strongly recommend that you look at alternate placement for those students. Especially if your workflow for students is more geared towards come in, take this practice test, let's see if you can pass an official test, which a lot of people do. That's where alternate placement would be a good idea, because then let's say they took this practice test, they've been in the program for a couple weeks, now you know they're going to need a lot more instructional time. You can still go in, even though you've given them alternate placement, you can go in and NRS test them. And then, once they have enough hours post test them, that's fine. We'll give you that gain if they make it. But if you're seeing a lot of people not be able to get to post test because they're quickly passing these subtests, that's where alternate placement is a great idea.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. And if you need that form, let me know. I can email it to you if y'all
Okay.
don't have that one already.
I think we do.
Okay.
I just want to, if my president or vice presidents get our data and they see that we've not made this post test in a long time, it's hard to explain to them, well, we didn't have to. So I just verifying that what I was doing was working.
Yeah. And if you need help explaining that, I'm always happy to help with that too.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Let's see, Courtney got that one. What is the Title II Adult Ed Personnel Survey for? What do I need to do? So, Table 7 is what we report federally. You can pull yours in advances. It is supposed to show everybody that you use Title II funds to pay for instruction or working with Title II students, that kind of thing. So the personnel survey is designed to give to new faculty and staff, or for faculty and staff that you've had for a while that may need to update their credential information, years of service, that kind of thing. So when you click on each user account in advances, you'll see that that personnel survey aligns to the questions asked for each of your user accounts. And that is the data that we use to populate the table 7 to show how money was used that we received from the feds. Courtney said, can you repeat the steps for CBOs to get access to Power BI? So if a CBO needs access to Power BI, they send an email to me or Courtney, and we will get you access to Power BI for basic skills, CCR. Everybody else, though, goes through their data coordinator locally. The only reason that CBOs go through the state office is because they can't access ServiceNow. Do you recommend a blanket alternate placement for all students in corrections? No. No, I do not. Because the best way, the easiest way to know, should I use alternate placement, is to ask yourself, how is this student going to make an MSG gain this program year? So if the answer is, well, they're in an HSE Spanish class and they're going to pass a subtest or complete their diploma, okay, alternate placement works. But if your response is, or if you have a student say, how's the student going to make an MSG? Well, they're going into this IET, so they're going to get MSG 3 through 5. Okay, alternate placement, good idea. If you can't come up with any other MSG that the student could earn other than pre and post testing, then you do not want to use alternate placement. If that makes sense. We're still doing great on time. So
We are. And I think we can
probably
wrap
meant
this up.
provisional placement, starting to see a trend in correctional students coming to us with that.
I have a question, but I can't find my hand.
I'm not sure why you're seeing the provisional placement coming in as much. It could be an issue with testing at the correctional facility. But anytime that you can get an actual placement on a student, that's always going to be much better than a provisional EFL on a student, because the provisional, if a student's got that on there, they're not going to show up on your no initial placement report, and then you may overlook them until they've been receiving a lot of hours of instruction. And unfortunately, any hours that they acquired between the time that you gave them that provisional EFL and the time you realize I need to assess them, that doesn't count towards a post test. So really you're restarting the instructional hour clock with what becomes the new pretest, which would be the test that you give after the provisional. So if you're seeing a lot at corrections, or you see a lot with students where they're like level 3 and then you start drilling into the inner hours and you see my credential next to it, that could be an issue with workflow locally, because 2 or 3 times a year Benchmark goes through and does apply a provisional EFL to any student missing an entering EFL. And the way that you know that it was them and not y'all is that it uses NRS level 3, and you'll see it was entered and approved by me, because they have to use somebody's credentials, so they use mine. But that is an auto thing that we do about 3 times a year for any missing entering EFL students. So that generally can be like there's a issue with getting NRS assessments back to whoever should be keying them, that kind of thing. Tracy, what was your question?
Okay, so I looked at advances and we have the correct amount of people. When you run table 7, if the number doesn't match, do we have to contact IT, right, to go in and remove them from the colleague system? Is that what we have to do?
No, you're not removing them from colleague. If you've got folks that are showing up on your table 7 that should not be on table 7 anymore because they no longer work in CCR, you just want to go under the program management tab. No, under the user management tab, the brown tab on the left-hand side of advances, click on your user list, and then go through and anybody's name that you see that is no longer working there, you can click on their name, scroll to the bottom, and just check the box that says inactive. That'll take them off your table 7 as being active.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay.
Okay. I think we're close to wrapping up, right, Jess?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm putting in the chat our PD archives. Again, we're still using NC Title II, so please go there for accessing all our webinars, and the recording for today's training will be included there in a week or 2 weeks maximum, including Jess's PowerPoint that she showed at the very beginning. I think I can also attach probably that form you referenced a few times as well for those who just joined us today. Anything else? Any final words, Courtney or Jess, that you would like to say before we bid you all adieu?
Lee, I'll go ahead and put the PowerPoint in the chat as well, in case
Great.
anybody wants it today. And I'll put the end of year reporting memo in case anybody didn't get that.
Perfect. Okay. Feel free to download that. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for really fun, exciting conversation. I know we were all on the edge of our seats for this.
Yeah. And as a reminder, we do not have the CCR one quick question for data call-in tomorrow, because we just felt like we probably overloaded you today. But we will pick that up again in 2 weeks. It should already be on your calendars. We go through May with those. So, but in the interim, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email myself, Courtney, or submit a ServiceNow ticket, and we are always happy to assist. Thanks,
Yes,
y'all.
thanks, everyone. We'll see you later. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Lee.
Thank you.